Rosa Corey, and I'm from the United States, California. And my topic, what I speak about, is one of the most vitally important issues of our age, and that is United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. It is the inventory and control plan. Inventory and control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world.
All land, all water, all plants, all minerals, all construction, all animals, all means of production, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world.
And this is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations back in 1992. It's a United Nations plan. It's called the Agenda for the 21st Century.
The United Nations General Assembly was the scene of a celebration in 2015, when 193 member countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a unanimous commitment to end poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change.
We need action from everyone, everywhere. 17 Sustainable Development Goals are our guide. They are a to-do list for people and planet, and the blueprint for success.
The SDGs are an agenda to balance human prosperity with protecting the planet.
Imagine there's no countries.
UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Shakira asked global leaders to imagine a world where we achieve the goals by 2030. While fellow UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Angelique Kidjo underscored a focus on Africa and developing countries. But the universal agenda is important to all nations, as leaders from developed countries also pledged to make the goals a reality.
Poverty, growing inequality exists in all of our nations, and all of our nations have work to do, and that includes here in the United States. And that's why today I am committing the United States to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
The Sustainable Development Goals build on the success of another 15-year plan. Created in the year 2000, the Millennium Development Goals sunset at the end of 2015. The MDGs halved extreme poverty, achieved equal primary education for girls and boys, and dropped HIV infection by 40%, among many successes. The SDGs go beyond the MDGs by improving the lives of everyone, everywhere, and create a better world for future generations.
Today, we are 193 young people representing billions more.
The youngest Nobel Peace Laureate, Malala, calls on world leaders to keep their promise to every child.
Each lantern we hold represents the hope we have for our future because of the commitments you have made to the global goals.
And Pope Francis advised world leaders to put humanity and the environment over politics.
Los gobernantes han de hacer todo lo posible a fin de que todos puedan tener la mínima base material y espiritual para ejercer su dignidad y para formar y mantener una familia.
193 nations unanimously committed to the Sustainable Development Goals.
It is so decided.
But the journey starts here. Now's the time to take global action for local results and move our people and planet towards a sustainable future.
And so many of us around the world think that, sustainable development, it just sounds so great. Isn't it about recycling and creative reuse and creating energy and food resources for everyone? And the answer is no, it really is not. It's about moving populations into city centers, concentrated city centers, and clearing them out of the rural areas. So I found out about it in a very unusual way, actually, because I spent my career as a legal witness, as an expert witness for the California Department of Transportation. I'm an expert in land use and land valuation. And so, of course, I was valuing property for the government so that the government could acquire that property for road projects. And what I found about 10 years ago, or 10 or 13 years ago, was that land actually, it was very difficult to say what it was worth because you couldn't know what people could do with it because they were being restricted from using their property. And as I explored that and found that it wasn't just in the San Francisco Bay Area where I was working, it was in fact all across the nation and the world, I looked behind that and I found United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development.
This map, entitled Simulated Reserve and Corridor System to Protect Biodiversity, illustrates how the UN's Agenda 21 plan would work in the United States. Under this takeover, all personal property rights would cease to exist. The red zones, which make up the map's majority, will be mandated for little to no human use. The yellow zones are buffer zones for highly regulated use. Only in the scant green areas is any normal human use allowed. The tiny black dots are the dense megacities, where transportation will be tightly controlled, freedom will be restricted, and people will be packed in like sardines, living in tiny 275 square foot units amounting to little more than jail cells, all in the name of saving the earth.
The goal is to move everyone out of the rural areas and into the large cities, and to destroy representative government, and to move it into to government by unelected boards and commissions. Now, here in the EU, of course, you've already moved to that position, where it's an erasure of jurisdictional boundaries, an erasure of national boundaries. And that is the goal, because as Zbigniew Brzezinski said in 1995, you can't just impose globalization pell-mell as a total movement.
I really enjoyed your presentation, but I'm wondering, how would you rate the United Nations in helping solve some of the geopolitical problems we've had? Some people say they're not adding a lot of solutions, and some people even suggest we should have another organization internationally that can do the job that the United Nations should be doing. And even people are talking about one world governments. I mean, how do you view the UN right now?
Well, there should be such an organization. The word should implies that there is a kind of moral imperative or need for it. But it doesn't exist. Why doesn't it exist? Because we don't have a situation in which there is a concentrated source of power that has universal reach. Not even America has that. So the United Nations functions well in areas in which it is possible to generate consensus. And that deals usually with elements pertaining to human suffering, or to well-being, or to health, for example, the Food Organization, the Health Organization, the relief agencies, or arbitration of conflicts of secondary importance, in which the international community can kind of endorse what the UN is doing. But the UN is not a world government. The UN, when it comes to politics, is based on a fiction, namely 190 states which are members, each of which is co-equal with the others, except for the 5 that have the veto right in the Security Council. So it is an organization which reflects the ongoing diversity of the world. And I think we have, as a consequence, we have to realize that real solutions to political problems, to political conflicts, come from those entities that have power and have the willingness or the ability to coalesce, or get stymied in the process, or even go into conflict. The UN can deal with areas regarding which there's a great deal of international consensus, like the ones I've mentioned. And that reality is going to continue for some time to come.
You have to do it incrementally, and the way to do that is through regionalization. Every nation that signed on to Agenda 21 has its local Agenda 21 plan. People in the United States are completely unaware of this. If I go out and talk about this, the United States press attacks me and calls me a conspiracy theorist, which is totally ridiculous. It is a conspiracy, but it's not a theory. It's a fact. Here in Europe, it's openly spoken about, local Agenda 21. The principles are public-private partnerships, which is fascism. And this is how it's implemented on the ground, is through this joining together between corporations, non-governmental organizations, and governments in order to cut out the actual individual, your voter, and instead to take that to a level where we literally cannot penetrate. And this is the goal. So this is already far progressed in Europe.
En septembre 2015, les États membres de l'ONU ont adopté l'Agenda 2030 et ses 17 objectifs de développement durable. Ils succèdent aux objectifs du millénaire mis en œuvre entre 2000 et 2015. Ceux-ci ont par exemple permis la réduction de moitié de la pauvreté, la diminution du taux de mortalité infantile dans le monde et l'amélioration de l'accès à l'eau potable et de l'accès des filles et des garçons à l'éducation. L'Agenda 2030 innove par son caractère universel. Ces 17 objectifs concernent tous les pays engagés et plus uniquement les pays et populations pauvres du Sud. De plus, l'accomplissement de chacun de ces objectifs ne peut être atteint qu'en respectant les 3 dimensions du développement durable, social, économique et environnemental. Pauvreté, eau, éducation, énergie, égalité des sexes, paix, protection de l'environnement font entre autres partie des 17 objectifs identifiés. L'universalité de l'Agenda 2030 implique une différenciation pour chacun des 17 objectifs de développement durable.
Right now in the United States, we are moving into massive regionalization. The United States has 50 states, and it's divided into cities, counties, and states, and then the federal government. Instead, Agenda 21 is top-down. It's global, regional, neighborhood, and none of those positions is elected. Now, what this truly means is if you tell people that they have to build only smart growth, high-density development in an urban center, and then no development, no buildings, no residential, no commercial can happen outside of that very, very concentrated area. Then what do you have? You have a concentration camp of the future. This is exactly what it looks like. And you see, it's very much more subtle and much more sophisticated than it was when the Nazis were doing it. You are not going to get thrown on a train car. You'll have your family well monitored. You will have your energy restricted. You will have your school service cut, your sheriff service cut. You will find that you are not able to get your goods to market, and then you have to move into the city, and then you will move into this high-density development that is subsidized with our property tax dollars, and pretty soon you will have the Wildlands Project, which is predicated on moving people out of the rural areas. And this is how it happens.
Je m'appelle Madeleine Rubin, je suis directrice de l'ASPAS, l'Association pour la protection des animaux sauvages.
Aujourd'hui, on va au Grand Barry et ensuite on prend le sentier, comme d'habitude, qui monte jusqu'à la montagne.
C'est la première grande réserve que l'association a achetée en 2012, de 130 hectares. La maîtrise foncière nous permet d'être le seul décideur de ce qui va se passer ou pas sur ce territoire. Du coup, on se prépare, on prend nos sacs à dos et puis on monte. Sur le Grand Barry, le projet faisait 150 000 €. On a lancé un appel à dons auprès de nos membres et en à peine 3 semaines, on avait réuni les fonds qu'il fallait pour acheter le terrain.
C'est lequel panneau que tu mets là?
On va mettre en gros.
Par rapport à quelle activité?
La chasse surtout.
On est quasiment les seuls espaces qui s'imposent autant de protection et donc d'interdits. Les activités qui auraient un impact, comme prioritairement on pense à la chasse. Dans les zones de réserve où il y a des points d'eau, on interdit également la pêche, mais aussi, et c'est une chose qui est très importante, c'est tout ce qui est exploitation du bois.
Donc en fait sur les réserves de vie sauvage, vu qu'on on travaille sur de la libre évolution totale, on laisse la nature faire les choses.
La présence d'arbres morts favorise la présence d'insectes, les insectes favorisent la présence des oiseaux, et en fait voilà, c'est tout un cycle qui se remet en place.
Pour nos forêts des réserves de vie sauvage, nous choisissons toujours la libre évolution. Grâce à la libre évolution, une forêt va pouvoir s'épanouir. Et il va y avoir des trajectoires qu'on ne connaît pas encore maintenant, qui vont être prises et nous aurons des surprises. Trajectoires qu'on ne connaît pas encore maintenant, qui vont être prises et nous aurons des surprises. On va avoir une diversité d'habitats et une biodiversité vraiment très très riche. Donc vive la libre évolution.
Toutes ces zones qui sont ouvertes vont être de plus en plus, parce que quand je regarde ce qu'a fait l'Espace, cette association, depuis quelques années, ça couvre. Là maintenant, il y a 500 hectares. Vous vous rendez compte, 500 hectares, il y a de quoi avoir des animaux en liberté et de voir aussi des gens qui oublient la cité pour être eux aussi en liberté.
La forêt française n'a jamais été aussi vaste, aussi sauvage.
C'est rare de nos jours d'avoir des animaux aussi près de nous, aussi peu craintifs.
Elle recouvre 30% de notre territoire, 2 fois plus qu'il y a 2 siècles.
La nature, il faut juste la laisser être pour qu'elle soit aussi belle.
Derrière nos jardins et nos villages, découvrons cette vitalité insoupçonnée et regardons-la comme jamais.
So, people say, well, hey, nobody's getting me off my land. Well, it's very easy. No one's going to come to your door with a gun. But they will move you off your land and you will be in the cities. And those cities will be full capability of surveillance, monitoring, and control. These buildings, these high-density buildings, are being built with a concept of eyes on the street. You become basically a deputized police adjunct. Your job is to watch the street. Your job is to watch your neighbor.
Justement, l'application qui fait polémique cette semaine, c'est Reporty, un outil testé à Nice qui promet de prévenir les délits, images à l'appui, et qui transforme les citoyens en témoins de crimes. Oui, sauf que la frontière entre prévention et délation n'est pas loin.
Un cycliste renversé à Nice.
Je vais décrasser un cycliste. Monsieur, calmez-vous s'il vous plaît.
L'infraction est filmée en direct avec un smartphone et retransmise immédiatement sur les écrans de la police municipale. Depuis aujourd'hui, la municipalité teste une application israélienne appelée Reporty, démonstration dans les rues de la ville.
Je suis témoin d'un fait, je veux le signaler. J'envoie ici, c'est transmis immédiatement. On va avoir un appel qui va arriver, sauf qu'on va bénéficier immédiatement de l'image de ce qui est vu, donc est transmis par la personne qui nous appelle, et surtout la géolocalisation de l'endroit où il se trouve.
Le dispositif est testé par 2000 Niçois, parmi lesquels des agents municipaux, des comités de quartier et aussi des membres du réseau Voisins Vigilants. Mais l'expérimentation divise la population.
C'est très bien, c'est très intelligent, au moins c'est assez rapide si après la police réagit tout de suite. C'est toujours pareil, s'ils viennent immédiatement, c'est très bien.
C'est un peu de la délation pour le coup. Alors ça peut être bien pour certains soucis, type branche qui tombe, ou quelqu'un qui va faire une connerie, genre se mettre sous les rails du tram.
L'opposition municipale dénonce un processus de délation généralisée.
Ça peut se justifier pour les vols ou pour des agressions, mais lorsqu'on entend parler de tags, de regroupement de personnes, de voitures gênantes, alors là, la question qui se pose, c'est où cela peut-il s'arrêter ?
L'utilisation de Reporty pose des questions éthiques. L'expérimentation prendra fin dans 2 mois. L'application pourrait être ouverte au téléchargement d'ici le printemps prochain.
Et on voit bien en effet tous les débats que va susciter la généralisation de Reporti, où tout le monde s'instaure finalement en justicier. Mais Guillaume, vous avez une autre application en tête, celle-ci s'appelle Nextdoor.
Oui, c'est une application qui a été créée en 2010 aux États-Unis. C'est un réseau social de voisinage, c'est-à-dire qu'il n'y a absolument aucun filtre. Lorsque vous postez un message, eh bien, tous vos voisins peuvent le lire. Ça peut servir pour des choses très bénignes. Vous recevez des personnes à dîner, il vous manque certains ingrédients, eh bien, il y a tous vos voisins qui vous viennent en aide, mais c'est surtout pour permettre à des voisins d'alerter en cas de comportement suspect. La police s'en sert comme source en fait.
Oui, donc c'est une autre technologie de reporting en quelque sorte. Mais vous vouliez également nous parler d'une tendance. Ce sera votre mot de la semaine et celle-ci, c'est le doxing. Et là, on passe à une nouvelle frontière.
Oui, doxing, c'est la contraction de deux mots, hein, document, et releasing, c'est-à-dire qu'on va dévoiler des documents et plus précisément des informations privées. Ça peut être une adresse personnelle, un numéro de téléphone, mais également où vont vos enfants à l'école. Ça peut être extrêmement grave. Alors, ça a été utilisé pour des causes qui peuvent être louables, par exemple la lutte par les Anonymous contre le Ku Klux Klan. Mais en fait, c'est à prendre avec énormément de pincettes parce qu'on sort de l'état de droit et les dommages peuvent être extrêmement très grave.
The war on terror is a war on you. And we all know this. We feel it. This is why we need to stop it. So this is our plan, is to use the courts at this point and stop this plan. And we're working on it.
Smart meter is part of a much bigger picture and a much bigger design. A two-way transmission device that ties into the larger smart grid plans that are being built out across the world.
Ce réseau entièrement pilotable, c'est le réseau intelligent, aussi appelé Smart Grid, la combinaison d'équipements informatiques et électroniques pour piloter le réseau électrique. L'élément essentiel à ce système, c'est votre compteur électrique qui devient communicant. Grâce au Smart Grid, on pourra détecter une surtension liée à une trop forte production et y apporter immédiatement la meilleure solution. Soit en activant le fonctionnement d'appareils électriques, votre chauffe-eau par exemple, soit en passant un ordre de stockage à la batterie de votre véhicule électrique. En cas de sous-tension, ce même compteur donnera un signal de réduction temporaire des consommations du client. Cette nouvelle technologie dessine le profil des réseaux de demain. En France, ce sont 35 millions de compteurs communicants qui permettront de gérer cet équilibre entre les productions et les consommations. Un réseau piloté au service de tous, capable d'intégrer et d'accompagner nos usages actuels et futurs de l'électricité.
The definition of a smart grid is a wireless system that will fundamentally turn every single appliance in your home into the equivalent of a transmitting cell phone. That's every computer, every television, every furnace, every air conditioner, every coffee machine, every printer, every single appliance that you have in your house will eventually, in a smart grid, have an antenna that's embedded into it that will transmit your usage data to a smart meter on the outside of your home that will then transmit your usage data to another tower receiving a usage signal that will then go to the utility company for supposedly billing purposes. Not all signals will just be about your individual use. There will be aggregate meters that will bounce signal from house to house to house within a neighborhood that will then accumulate all of the usage data that will transmit that to the utility company. Now, what that will do is that the end metering system that is transmitting all of that data will be firing an RF signal at many, many times a second, which will increase the average homeowner's radio frequency radiation exposure exponentially.
Et c'est aussi l'accès à de nouveaux usages. Donc ce compteur dit intelligent, c'est vraiment aussi un projet de société derrière une filière technologique créatrice d'emplois, puisqu'on estime à 10 000 emplois le nombre d'emplois potentiel sur la fabrication, mais il y a aussi l'installation, il y a l'entretien, il y a les nouveaux usages qui vont être portés par ce compteur intelligent. Et donc ce que je souhaite, par la loi de transition énergétique, mais aussi par la mise en mouvement des filières industrielles et de nos savoir-faire, accélérer l'objectif. Notre objectif, là, c'est 3 millions de foyers donc équipés en 3 ans. On va essayer d'aller plus vite, puisque normalement 80% des foyers doivent être équipés en 2020.
Normal cell walls, fairly separated and looking healthy. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function.
Now, here's some headlines of what Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 are seeking to do. And by the way, these are agendas for the transformation of global society, which gentrification is very much a part, as I'll come to, that are orchestrated globally through the UN, but instigated locally. You look up your local council or your local state or wherever where you are in the world, and you'll invariably see that they have signed up to Agenda 21 and they're supporting Agenda 2030. And because this global agenda is being introduced locally, they are hiding the global coordination of it. Oh no, it's just a local council initiative. Oh really? The same initiative with that council and that council and that council and that country. This is how the thing's being systematically hidden. So here, from their own documents, are some of the headlines of what these agendas want to do. This is Agenda 21, first of all. They want an end to national sovereignty. Now, when you look at these different agendas and documents, and then you compare them with the wish lists of the global social engineering organizations, the lists virtually are identical. And one that comes up again and again is the end to national sovereignty. This is what the European Union is all about. It's there to take national sovereignty away as this Hunger Games society unfolds. Now here is one of the great ironies that so-called progressives who are up in arms, understandably, about what has happened with Grenfell Tower and about austerity programs, which are all part of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, they vehemently support, most of them anyway, they go out on marches demanding that these crazy old people that voted to come out of the European Union have their decision overturned and we stay in. Yes, we stay in a European Union which is run by dark suit, unelected bureaucrats that virtually no one can name, and is there to systematically take away national sovereignty in line with Agenda 21, 2030. And they also support basically open border immigration. And one of the key reasons that the migrant crisis has been systematically created, and it was, I mean, the evidence is overwhelming, is to bring lots of different cultures together to dilute the indigenous culture for a very simple reason. It's all psychological in the end. It's all a mind game. One of the greatest forces of resistance to the end of national sovereignty is a sense of national identity. I mean, I'm not into nationalism and national identity. I just see everything as consciousness, but that's just me. But large numbers of people with a sense of national identity will resist having sovereignty taken away in its entirety because of that sense of national identity. What the systematically created migrant crisis is about, on one level anyway, is ending that sense of national identity. So the resistance to the end of sovereignty, national sovereignty, will be massively diluted. Something that's happening, by the way. Here you go. State planning, this is Agenda 21. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity, equal slavery. What that means is the centralization of power over every aspect of human life. Something I've been warning about. They want a world government to oversee this, and we're moving towards that all the time. The European Union is such like the so-called superstates are the next strata down in this Hunger Games structure from the world government that they want to introduce. The state to define the role of business and financial resources. That's the centralization of power over all business and all finance. Abolition of private property. Apparently it's not sustainable, but that won't apply to the less than 1%. The end of private property means you're taking away security from people and you're making them dependent on outside forces then for where they live. Restructuring the family unit. This is on the wish list of all these social engineering organizations. They want an end to the family unit because they want the state to take over control of the upbringing of children so they can be programmed with the state's mentality from the earliest possible age. This is why parental power is over their children is being eroded and eroded and eroded and handed to schools and handed to bureaucrats. This is why around the world, not least in Britain, you have this phenomenal number of children taken for spurious reasons from loving parents by social services who are on financial incentives to do it. All these things are connected. You have to connect the dots before you see the picture. People told what their job will be. We're talking about centralized fascist dictatorships here, or a dictatorship globally in the end. Major restrictions on movement. So we're seeing moves towards that, making it more and more difficult to travel. And now we come to this part of the agenda that is specific to situations like Grenfell Tower. These are the creation of human settlement zones, high density micro apartments which allow 24/7 surveillance of everything that you do. And they're being brought about by not upkeeping and repairing property in areas you want people out of, and forcing them into the areas where you want to densely locate them. also, like I say, with increasing prices to make it impossible for people to live in certain areas. And then once you are forced out of the area you live, well, you go and live where you're designated to live, and more these mega cities for the what are now the middle and working classes start to be created, and more the land is cleared in the designated capitals for the rich and powerful. Now, Agenda 2030, like I say, voted into being at the UN General Assembly in 2015. What this is using to bring about the same end is the technique of tell them what you want to do in a way that they couldn't possibly argue with. So on the list of goals of Agenda 2030 is no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities, they're the human settlement zones, and communities, responsible consumption, production, climate action, we'll come to that in a second, protecting life below water and life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships to achieve these ends. Now, of course, that is a load of meaningless frickin' platitudes. What that actually means to so-called achieve that, they don't really want to achieve that, they're just telling you they do, is the centralization of power over all those areas of human life on a global level, because they'll say we can't achieve these laudable ends without the global power to do it. And people have asked me, and I understand it many times, you're saying that this whole human-caused climate change is a giant hoax. Yeah. Well, why would they do that? I'll tell you why. I've just told you why. Because Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 are being justified, massively justified, by needing to change society to protect from climate change caused, they say, by human activity, but not. And so we have another irony now. Not only are progressives who protest about Grenfell Tower and protest about austerity supporting a European Union that is fundamentally part of the Hunger Games society structure that is creating the austerity and creating the situation where the Grenfell Towers can happen. But these progressives are also vehemently saying everything must change to protect the world from climate disaster, which is a fundamental manufactured excuse to introduce Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. And this cognitive dissonance of opposing one thing but supporting another that's creating the thing you oppose is through pure, undiluted ignorance with a hell of a lot of arrogance thrown in. People say, oh, we don't read the Daily Mail, we don't watch Fox News. Yeah, okay, where do you get your information from then? Oh, we get it from The Guardian and MSNBC and the New York Times. Yeah. Think of a postage stamp. The media organizations that you condemn are there on the postage stamp. The ones you read and watch are there on the same postage stamp. They're just a different slightly differently emphasized expression of the same information source. And thus, you have basically the same news packaged in a different way. What people need to do is get off the frickin' postage stamp and start looking at information outside the mainstream media that is available, and then they might have a chance of knowing what's going on. And stop campaigning for and promoting organizations and ends that are part of the very creation of that which you say you don't like. And if you have a target population, and it's a vast population because you're talking about virtually everyone who's not in the tiny few, then what you have to do to control that population is to divide and rule it. You have to set it at war with itself. So it is so focused on fighting between itself that people don't look up in different factions, different religions, different income brackets, different political beliefs. They don't all look up and say, hold on, the string's attached to me and the string's attached to you. There's only one bloke holding them. Yes, exactly. Human society is being played off against each other all the time. Migrants and non-migrants, this color against that color, this religion against that religion, this income bracket against this income bracket, this political belief system against this political belief system. And I look on, my head shakes anymore, it'll probably fall off at some point. We need to stop looking to politicians to make things happen. These political parties are connected to the same system that is driving the Hunger Games society, though most are so ignorant they don't even know it. And people show in times of tragedy the true nature of what we could be. But you see it again and again. You see this humanity coming out. Then the charity record comes out and we go through this process. And then, once it's out of the headlines, it's out of sight and it's out of mind. And everything goes back to how it was before. We've got to make a stand at some point. And we've got to come together and put down all these ridiculous, ludicrous things that are there to divide us. And start sorting this out together. In mutual support, irrespective of background, creed, whatever. Because if we don't, this Hunger Games society will unfold because it is unfolding now. And those with a lot of money in the bank, but not part of this elite, we now have something called bail-ins. Bail-ins are when a bank crashes, they're not bailed out by taxpayers via governments collectively. But the bail-in means they can go direct to the accounts of customers of that bank and just take their money. That's how fragile it all is. That's how fragile people who think they're okay really are to this evil that is manipulating human society. And that's the point.